Well, hey, everybody. Here we are on the Business Roundtable Podcast, where I am one of your hosts, David Carr of Steward Your Business, helping small business owners and their teams come together to accomplish great things. I really focus on the people side of business. And we've got a returning host guest, Charlie Chen. Welcome back, Charlie.
Thank you, David. Thanks
Mm.
for always having me.
Of
Great to be back.
course.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm super excited to have you back because we were talking before we started recording this. We're going to talk about a really important topic that specifically you have a lot of experience in the IT world. Um, I have recent experience. Unfortunately, for those of you, by the time you listen to this, um, we've had some pretty horrific fires here in Southern California. And I unfortunately was a part of one of those called the line fire here in San Bernardino County. We had another one called the bridge fire and airport fire, all simultaneously happening here in September when I'm recording this. Fortunately, I'm back home, but I was evacuated for over a week. Uh, really touch and go, very stressful. And I thought the idea or the topic was very timely, and having you, Charlie, on here specifically about how do we lead businesses and teams well through uncertainty, through ever-changing times. And we try to plan, we try to prepare, but in the reality is there's always going to be uncertain things that are going to come in, creep in, and really affect us
Yeah.
emotionally, mentally, physically. Right,
Yeah, for
Charlie?
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just obviously for this podcast, it's focused on business resiliency. And so in our world, in cybersecurity, we don't talk about the fact that, if you get hit with a cyber attack, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And oftentimes businesses will think that, well, I mean, I don't have much, I'm too small, this, that, and the other. But even if you are small, and when you do get hit, because you will be attacked, it's just that's just the reality of the current cybercrime landscape. Because there's literally subscription model toolkits for the bad guys to subscribe to, with all the hacking tools that they need, with the leads list for them to hit.
Hmm.
So that's the reality that we live in today. And so when you do get hit, as small as you think you are, it's gonna hurt. So um,
Hmm.
having resiliency, both from a technology standpoint and also emotional standpoint, right?
Hmm.
Because from a personal human to human aspect, which is the side that you deal with, David,
Yeah.
um, no matter how much you plan, there's things that will happen that is out of our control. And
Yeah.
so, um, how have you seen, like, just from the culture consulting that you do for businesses, in terms of leveling up businesses and their staff on resiliency?
Yeah, the great question. So, for me, just as those are listening, I define resiliency as that ability to recover quickly, to from setbacks, from challenges, and adapt to the changing environment. So, what I would ask, or people are thinking and listening to us as we're talking about, Charlie, is resilience. Are you a person that has are you building that in yourself and in your team? So for me, one of the things I work on with leaders is their mindset. How are they in a situation of an emergency? How are they when people trigger them? How are they when there's these ever-changing circumstances and situations? Can they stay calm? Can they be solution oriented? How are they focused under pressure? So mindset is a really big one, because
Mm,
it can be either help you move forward, or it can also be very detrimental. And oftentimes people catastrophize things
yeah.
worse. And that's one thing I saw, even, I'm watching some of the social media stuff through the recent fire, Charlie. And some
Hmm.
people are very positive and trying to figure out solutions. And other people are like, oh my goodness, it's going to be so much better. They just kind of literally like throw gas on the fire. I mean, not literally, but you know what I mean? They're they're making it worse. And so it
Right.
makes it very hard to be resilient, those
Hmm.
people.
Yeah.
Um, So what about you? What's your thought on that mindset component?
Oh yeah, it's I would say majority of our experience of life as human beings is our mindset because I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, I mean, there's nothing bad or wrong about it,
Hmm.
but human beings, we are meaning making machines. So everything that happens, everything that's said or not said, done or not done, um, anything that happens or doesn't happen, we add meaning to it automatically. We
Hmm.
create a story and a narrative around it. So um, two people with the same exact circumstance can have completely different interpretations, and that interpretation, that thought, that mindset, those thoughts that they have around their circumstance is going to be that filter in which they see their life through and
Hmm.
experience and dictate the experience that they have as a human, you know. So
Yeah.
and that's really the biggest thing that sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom.
Mhm.
And it's both a blessing and a curse. It's a two or double-edged sword, right? So it
Yeah.
depends. We can either allow it to disempower us
Hmm.
and rob us of our freedom, our peace of mind, or we can choose to be with the moment and come from a matter of choice and free will of how we want to show up, regardless of the circumstances, because that is really is the only thing that if we level up on ourselves and get present and get self-aware,
Mm.
is the thing that we can control because we cannot control other people. We cannot control circumstances.
Yep.
So,
Right.
yeah,
Well, and along those lines, tied to mindset is our emotional intelligence. How, like you said, we can't affect anybody else, but how do we manage our own emotions? How do we deal with the emotions of others in our time, a critical time? Um, and I'm talking about the fire incident that I faced, but you brought up an issue of cybersecurity, or what if people, or what are the people are like holding their company for ransom, basically, right?
right,
Ransom,
exactly.
and how,
Yeah,
that you could make some very bad decisions because you're
yeah,
stressed. You're like, I don't have my business, right?
yeah,
Emotionally, you're
yeah,
you're you're not in a good place.
yeah,
And so, this idea of building resilience is really key so that we can overcome those uh, unexpected challenges, right?
right, right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's a the saying, right? Like, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So we want things to go well. Obviously, it's easy to be calm when things are going well, but you do want to plan for contingencies. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens?
Yes.
But there's a fine balance there, right? Like if you're living too much in that space, then you are also robbing yourself of being present and enjoying each moment as well. But so there is definitely a fine balance there, I would say.
So I want to get to, this is good. So we're giving an introductory to resiliency, and we'll come back to that a little bit more. But let's just say you have good resiliency. That's great. If we can, ideally get there and have a positive mindset, be emotionally intelligent, clued in. But that's only part of the battle, right? Because if we're resilient, like I'm resilient, I can do it, but we don't have a way in. I'm going to bring in redundancy here in a
Hmm.
case of, or a safety net in business,
Hmm.
particularly.
Hmm.
You're only half of the way there. And I
Yeah.
know this is important, particularly in the IT world, in other ways as well, but particularly because I know backups, right? I remember back in the day we'd have like these tape backups that we'd have to back up our things to,
Yep.
because we knew the power might go out, somebody's computer might crash or whatever. So for me, just again defining redundancy is really just having backup plans. It's having systems or people to maintain operations despite the challenges there.
Right.
Here in when I went to a local community meeting recently, the county had the executive for the chief that oversaw the operation for emergency services. So that person specifically is there about backup, getting all these different resources in place. And so what does it mean for you, just broadly, Charlie, when we talk about redundancy for you and even for your organization and how you serve your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in our capacity and what we do for businesses is um, risk management from in terms of protecting their data. And so, uh, hardware failures happen. Not something that you can predict. And so definitely having the right structure in place and leveraging the right technology, so that way if your computer craps out or your server gets ransomed, or your computer for that matter, you have a recourse. You have a way to restore your business and continue to operate. So that's why
Hmm.
there's a term, BCDR, business continuity
Mm.
disaster recovery. And same thing with emails. Rogue employees, they can delete their emails. I mean, there are ways to retrieve them through, the back end on the Microsoft admin side, but there are
Mhm.
additional layers that you can
Mhm.
back up, um, even Microsoft, or Google, or because those are typically the two big players within the business space.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also risk management. It's not just about like the redundancy part, right? That's important to leverage the right technology, which it's impossible for businesses to go and small businesses to necessarily figure all that out themselves. And so
Yep.
that's where we
Mhm.
come in,
Yeah.
and as the outsourced IT department. But also just risk management. Typically, you want to model after the best practices of what um, enterprises are doing, which typically no one has admin access on the login that they use, that they do their day-to-day work on. And
Mhm.
so you want to minimize your surface attack by putting in as many roadblocks, if you will,
Mm.
as possible to slow down a potential attacker. And so those are the different ways that you can add redundancy, so that just like on the business operation side,
Yep.
that's why there's contract, that's where there's agreements, that's where
Yep.
there's clauses. These are all risk management. That's the name of the game, right? Risk
Yep.
management.
Yep.
So the more you can manage and minimize risk, the better you are, to set yourself to be more resilient.
Yeah. Resilient and have that redundancy. One thing
Yeah.
you were talking about that, for those of you that are business owners relying on supplies, right? Supply chain. We saw that a lot during COVID, where people relied on one specific supply chain, and that got cut off, and it severely hampered their business. They didn't they didn't have any kind of redundancy, even though maybe they had their main supply chain, but even a backup so they could at least continue. A lot of like restaurants and other struggled with this because they didn't think, well, I've always got this one; it's always there. Well, yes, and most of the time it is there, but like you said, Charlie, inevitably something's going to happen. So, what do you have any other options there on the
Right.
table? Have you looked at that? And if you're not looking at that, then I would say you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation,
Yeah.
because you're like, I don't even know what options are available to me. I haven't even investigated the options that are available to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then from a protection standpoint, it's not just one size fit all or one solution, one layer. Just like on our doors, there's typically multiple locks on our front doors, and then we
Mhm.
add an alarm, right? So that's a multi-layered approach.
Mhm.
That's what can give you that's in essence redundancy as well, of
Mhm.
different protective measures. And so we would do the same for your business in terms of the first surface of attack would be emails, because over 90% of
Mhm.
cyber breaches or security breaches are through links or malicious attachments that come in
Yep.
through email. So having a layer there before it even hits our inbox. And then after that, once if it somehow gets activated on our computer, having the right tools, not just something that's off the shelf, which unfortunately most hackers that are out there attacking businesses, they kind of have their number on those off-the-shelf products, and so that's more like a little wooden garden fence for them. So we want something that's gonna do what we call MDR, managed detection and response. It has auto remediation, it auto quarantines, it auto cuts them off, so that way, it's not 100% dependent and reliant on humans that are watching and manually having to respond 24/7, 365. That's just not realistic, and
Mm-hmm.
not it's going to be cost prohibitive. And
Right.
so just leveraging the right tools, and even tools that leverage AI. I mean, there's no
Mm-hmm.
reason with all that technology power that we have available today to not leverage a provider such as ourselves. It's not just us, but the good business, I guess, service providers out there are going to leverage tools that are making use of AI in their cybersecurity defense approach. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, so that
Yeah,
think
that's a
about it
lot.
from that standpoint.
There's
Yeah,
a lot of good things
absolutely.
in there, and
Yeah.
you're kind of jumping ahead on part of it because I want to unite these two between resilience and redundancy. But you talked a lot about operational redundancy.
Hmm.
The other part I would add in there is, and again, this is my half of it: the team redundancy, the people, ensuring that you have the cross training, that you have a bench of skilled people. This is hard. You and I are talking right before we got on here. Sometimes you're called in a lot of different directions. You're like, man,
Hmm.
it would be really nice to have, an on-call employee or potentially a subcontractor or somebody else that could help me in all the things I need to do. At least have the option. Now, maybe sometimes
Yeah.
you, depending on the circumstance, the contract is not, it's not allowed or prohibited. It's prohibited, but still, looking for ways that you can have that. In my experience in doing a lot of environmental consulting, um, yeah, very highly skilled technical people. They have to be approved and authorized to work on the work on a contract, let's just say. But if they get sick or they want to take time off or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I don't have anybody else, your project could stop,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And so
Yeah.
it affects multiple other individuals. So it's like, and it takes a lot of effort and energy sometimes because you've got to find these key people, and
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, maybe you're not going to find you're not going to find the
Hmm.
identical, like, switch out one for the other, but somebody that's at least similar or has some can get maybe 75-80% of the way of what the other person was doing, right, Charlie?
Yeah. Yeah. That's it, in IT we call it N+1. It's just that backup, right? Like, so we want to have an N+1 when it comes to human resource as well, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the day-to-day functions of keeping the business running, because you really don't have a business if you don't have redundancy of different people being able to cover for each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if the
Yeah.
business is so dependent on the people that you have now, where if one goes out, then you can't continue to operate, then that's not really a business.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, uh, small businesses starting out, they almost become like too top heavy,
Yep.
and I mean we're guilty of that too.
Yeah.
And
Oh
so
yeah.
yeah, so definitely having that N+1, that redundancy of being able to cover tasks that key employees are doing, or just any of the staff, it's going to help build that redundancy and resilience of your business.
Yeah. So I want to intersect these two because they're important. The balancing, having the resilience side, like I said, resilience is great, but if you don't have that balance and have the redundancy in there, the resilience enables us to recover, if you will, from the disruptions, while the redundancy ensures that we have operations continue when it goes wrong. So one of the things you brought up, and I think it's worth highlighting again, was conducting some type of risk assessment. Like,
Hmm.
and so how do you go about that, or how have you done that, Charlie, in your company, within your company, and then with your clients that you help? How do you evaluate and identify those vulnerabilities?
Yeah. Well, luckily we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Hmm.
There's NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, and so
Hmm.
they have a framework that a lot of the different um, regulatory bodies for the different industries, like HIPAA for healthcare, PCI compliance for anybody that takes payment information, like, or card
Hmm.
information, or like in the manufacturing vertical or industry, if they're part of the DoD, or Department of Defense supply
Hmm.
chain, there's this whole CMMC readiness, which is like the don't I don't there's
You
too
got
many
all the
acronyms,
you're
too many
hitting it with all the
acronyms in our
acronyms,
industry.
Charlie.
Yeah, so the CMMC is essentially a cybersecurity readiness for specifically for DoD contractors and their supply chain, that is also a lot of them are based on the same NIST standard, and so we're able to just leverage that existing framework. And there's over 120 or 30 different things to check. And so that's when it becomes cumbersome, to where a business owner wants, or a business and their staff want to focus on growing their business rather than getting into the weeds on what all these different controls mean
Hmm.
and these requirements mean. And that's where we get brought in. I'll give you an example. Even a print shop, they do print for um, like one of the local utility companies,
Yeah.
and the utility company hires a third party, uh, I guess, auditing body, and tells them, hey, you need to follow meet these NIST requirements, and they have no idea.
Yeah.
They're busy, growing and running their print shop, and so that's where they brought us in to help them with that audit and bringing their technology up to par, up to the standard that framework requires. And so we definitely specialize in helping with that um, risk assessment. It doesn't have to be forced onto them like that. Like in your
Hmm.
business, it's
Yeah.
almost better if you force it on yourself proactively, you
Yeah.
know, to assess your risk
Yes.
before you're being forced to do
Yes.
that. Yeah, so that
Absolutely.
way, yeah, the byproduct of it is it makes you more resilient against cyber attackers.
Great observation. I'll run with it, Charlie, because really that's what happened. Business owners, I think they don't see that, particularly on the people side. Sometimes they don't do what I call an organizational health assessment, or really like an accounting of where are they at now, what's working and what's not working. And they're like, we're just kind of getting by, getting by. Well, yeah, I understand. Like you said, you're kind of like you said, this print shop, but you're setting yourself up for some challenges down the line if you're not being proactive in doing this. So the companies I see that invest in that do that, they're actually much stronger, more resilient. They're able to face challenges and not, stumble, if you will, forward. They can actually walk confidently, which leads me
Right.
into kind of my next component here, as in addition to risk assessments, but really, and I know you do this, but cross-train employees, cross-train, build flexibility in your team functions, make sure that one person doesn't have all of this, right? You just
Yes.
told me you do multiple things, Charlie. You're cross-trained in all aspects of the business almost,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that way, it doesn't mean that you it's ideal that you do those things, but you understand them. You can support your team,
Yeah.
and I've seen this too many times where they have a key person and they really haven't shared and released information and processes and how we do
Right.
these things, and then they're gone, and
Yeah.
you're left picking up pieces for months or
Right.
longer, if you
Yeah.
even get the chance to pick up the pieces, because you might have lost the contract, the client, and you're like, well,
Right.
dang, that's gone now,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to circle it back to what you do for businesses as
Yeah.
well. I mean, from setting the culture and the people, and I mean, the way I think about what you do for businesses, it
Mhm.
builds that resiliency of the business itself, and redundancy, so that the vision, as you always talk about,
Mhm. Yep.
of the founder actually gets realized,
Yeah.
because you pull it out of them
Yep.
and make that into a process, make that into something that gets adopted, right? Because we can have all the tech in the world, we can have all the great
Mhm.
ideas in the world, or great aspirations and core values and mission and vision, action statements, but if it doesn't get adopted, right?
Mhm.
User adoption is the biggest, um, like, I guess, undervalued, or that's the biggest pitfall, I would say,
Yeah.
both in our realm in technology and cybersecurity, because people is one of the three legs. There's technology, there's process, and then there's people. So
Yes.
if we can have the technology and process, but if the people are not adopting one or the other or both, it's not going to work. And so I would
Yes.
say the same in your case with what you do for businesses. Would you
Yes.
agree?
Yeah, 100%. We need all of those things.
Yeah.
You know, the technology, the processes serve the people, and the people who use those they can't do their job as effectively without those things. They're
Right.
all linked.
Right.
And I've seen unfortunate organizations that didn't value they valued very much the process and the system because it's a little bit more it's a little easier, like you said, that's a little easier to measure sometimes. Like you do this. People's a little harder. And
Yeah.
that's why I use some of the tools that we've talked about in the podcast in the past, like Five Voices and other things for teams, because I want to have you shared language to understand this
Yeah.
and to be an intelligent human leader. That's my other podcast, literally
Nice.
intelligent human leadership. So if we don't aren't intentional about that, like you're saying, Charlie, we're going to struggle. And again, this is where I think business owners really miss the mark. Either you know they're more apt. It's a little bit more concrete to see the cybersecurity side as an example. It's a little
Hmm.
harder sometimes to see the people side. But like you said, if they're not in there, you're gonna have a
Yeah.
real difficult time realizing that vision and mission,
Right.
achieving it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
I
yeah.
I I would imagine, just from working with you,
Mhm.
David, about like what you do for businesses, would you agree that um, it actually does build redundancy and resiliency when you are able to retain good talent
Oh,
and
yeah.
good human resource, and obviously have whatever vision you have and process that you put in place, weed out those that are not in alignment with that. That's really what's going to build that resiliency and redundancy in the business, because if it's a revolving door, like, you don't have
Yeah,
resiliency in your
you do
business.
not. You
Yeah.
do not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Because
I literally just talked with a gentleman, this past week about that, Charlie. He worked for a big utilities company for a time. He came in, and the other person that he was working under, who was supposed to help him, this person was so busy, quote unquote, they couldn't mentor and provide him key information to help him actually help the job. And he ended up leaving. And he had a lot of great talent and experience. And he was just like, his exit interview, he basically said that, look, I want to do more, but this other person, for various reasons, wasn't able to. So they've created a process or a system that's not sustainable, and if they're not being conscious about that, they're gonna have bigger problems. They're fortunate they've
yeah,
got a person that's really, like, doing a lot, but that person's not gonna always gonna be there. And
yeah,
they lost another good person, so it's a double whammy because
yeah,
eventually that person's gonna be gone, and they don't have anybody else
yeah,
that they could get to learn that. So to your point, Charlie, yeah, that is very true.
yeah. And I almost would say, how there's this whole buzz about AI, and how
Mhm,
businesses that don't use AI are gonna go out of business.
mhm.
Uh, or I'm sorry, they're saying that AI is gonna take over
But I wish,
jobs,
yeah,
or
yeah.
like replace humans.
Mhm.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say businesses that leverage AI will replace businesses that don't.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing about um, resiliency from a culture standpoint, in terms of leveraging the things that you help businesses with.
Mhm,
Businesses that prioritize, like, their culture, and
mhm.
serving their staff, and empowering their staff with the, I guess, the backing and the equal level, if not more, tender, loving care that they want to provide to their clients or their customers.
Yep.
Those companies that are not doing that are going to be replaced with businesses that are keeping that top of mind.
Yes. Yes.
And more, like the modern workforce, especially after COVID, during COVID and after, they're not going to put up with a workplace that is not going to care about them and that is not going to, um, you know, focus on culture. They're not
Mhm.
gonna they're less likely to put up with that like culture that's not gonna be conducive of their growth.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's a
I
huge
think
trend.
that there's
Yeah.
an attractance to companies that believe in resilience.
Hmm.
See, like we talked about at the very beginning, that ability to adapt, right? And
Hmm.
to adjust to changes. Because if you look at, I'm 50 and we were talking earlier about changes in technology and other things like that. There's a, it's constant. And so this
Yep.
younger generation lives in a place of almost they become resilient. And then and if a company is not resilient and adapting to those changes,
Hmm.
expected or unexpected, and they're like, well, we just do it this way, just live with it, kind of this, get in line.
Right. Right.
You're right. That's not going to attract a lot of people because they're like, well, I
Right.
want to be innovative. I want to create. I want to see. I want to look at all the possibilities now. And there's so many different possibilities using AI and other tools to envision
Right.
what could be,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then that's your redundancies. Like, how can we have all these other things in place?
Yeah.
Uh, which I want to ask you. I want to give some practical tips here as we're getting close, wrapping up the episode here, Charlie, of practical tips for some business owners and leaders about
Hmm.
what would you say, um, is ways that they, as an individual or, again, that business owner or leader, how would you develop personal resilience? How have you developed that for you? How have you seen that in your team? What have you been doing as a practical tip that people can listen and start to implement that?
Yeah. Leaders are readers, right? So
Mhm.
if you're not growing yourself and committed to personal development and leveling yourself up, then you it's the law of the lid that
Mhm.
John
Yeah.
Maxwell talks about, right? In the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, your organization will only attract to up to the level and below of where you are as the leader. And so if you want to grow a business that's actually going to set you free and the people that work for you give and help them achieve their goals and dreams,
Mhm. Mhm.
then I guess the only way I would put it is constantly live in um like personal development and just keeping that open mind, learning because there's so much out there, language books. I mean, it doesn't. I'm a slow reader, but I choose the ones I pick and choose on what I want to learn, what I want to read. That's going to level me up. But there's also apps that I've used that that summarize books, and so there's a lot of different ways. There's audiobooks, obviously. There's a lot of different ways. There's no shortage of information.
Yep.
It's about how to absorb that and put that into
Put it
practice. And
practice.
if you don't, you're going to become obsolete.
Mhm. Well, I'll dovetail in that because you and I met because we were in a way of networking. So
Hmm.
finding mentors and peers,
Yep.
uh, that can support you in
Yep.
challenging times. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said before, when we came on here recording tonight, I was mentioning to you how many people specifically reached out to me in different formats, um, knowing that, number one, I raised an issue that I had a problem, a challenge with the fire. So number one, you have to be self-aware to know that you have problems, know that there's challenges going on. You kind of don't live in la la land.
Yeah.
But number two is then build that network and community, be a part of it.
Right.
I'm a firm believer you give before you get. So I'm a person of giving. That's why we have this podcast as a way of giving to our community, showing value and resources, because that's how we want to come, not just taking, but let me show you how we can help, and you offered help to me, many others did, and so that is so very important in challenging times. Don't go it
Yeah.
alone.
Right.
Find your tribe, find your people that you can rely on,
Right.
and that's so important to your success, right? In building that
Absolutely.
resilience.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, the other thing I may add is just, this is more maybe just physical, but like, what's your self-care, what's your mental fitness, how are you taking care of yourself physically. I use
Mhm.
meditation sometimes, or other things, but to face the day-to-day challenges, some things are not great, but you don't
Mhm.
know how things are going to come up, and how are you going to face that? And I liked also what you said about leadership training. There's lots of information you can learn, and then
Yeah.
again through the mentors or other people, but be challenged in how you're implementing it. That's why I like coming on this podcast and hearing from folks like you,
Yeah,
Charlie. It's like how you're
absolutely.
going to apply it.
Yeah, no, I definitely like to give credit where credit is due. So, we've been a couple years in now,
Yeah.
leveraging and implementing um, different concepts that we learned from the DeJulius Group, which is a customer service oriented organization where they consult huge businesses that are known for their world-class customer experience, like the Ritz,
Mhm.
Disney, Starbucks, you name it, right?
Mhm.
Chick-fil-A. And so we were fortunate enough to be a part of a peer group. Once again, like you said, network, right? You make sure you're in a network of peers so that way you have that common goal and you can work through the challenges together as opposed to going it alone. But
Yeah.
because byproduct of being a part of as a byproduct of being part of this peer group, they contracted the DeJulius group to put together this ongoing CX, client or customer experience leader education for us, where we meet with their heads quarterly, and then monthly we have our own peer group that are for the CX leaders. And so
Yeah.
I've been super fortunate in that sense. And then from me, I pass it down to the team where each quarter we have a different initiative, different things that we cover from that are pulled off from our core values, pulled off from our customer bill of rights, if you will. We call it the
Yeah.
Intellisys way. We define in there like our model, which is always deliver wow, and
Mhm.
defining what does wow feel like,
Mhm.
and putting on there are never and always, never say this or never do this and do
Mhm.
this instead. And so um, just making sure that you're incorporating that in your data, especially where a lot of business, more and more business are gonna be like a remote workforce like we are.
Mhm.
And so we literally have people all over the world that are part of our team. And so every morning and every day end, we have a huddle twice a day without fail. And speaking of the physical um, exercise aspect, we actually do physical exercises together on our morning huddle.
Hey, that's cool.
And yeah, so because motion creates emotion, right? So first thing in the morning, if we're groggy, we're just like rolling out of bed and just go straight to work without any sort of physical uh, activity and exercise, then our brains are not fully activated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so prioritizing that, and just from a personal side, I just picked up tennis, and so my son
Mhm.
and I have been playing over the weekend. So
Awesome.
yeah, thank you. So besides meditation, which is huge, because that's the mental fitness aspect, what else are you doing, David, in terms of
Yeah,
other
I think
ways of
personal
building personal?
resilience, I
Yeah.
think I think doing some kind of physical activity is great,
Mhm.
even if it's just a little bit. People think like, "Well, I didn't do a lot," but just even a little bit will help, um, getting moving. I do that part of my core 4 every day. My goal is to do moving, some kind of physical exercise, whether it's, you know, lifting weights, just doing some stretching. I love hiking, biking. In the wintertime, I like skiing. So I think it is important that you take care of your physical body as well as your mental body,
Yeah.
mental state. It's all part of your body, your mind, body, mind, and soul, if you will. I also like that you said to me, you brought up in teams, and I think the team component you mentioned, and I'll just highlight, is that the physical activities, you come together as a huddle, so you're creating a space for communication,
Mhm.
sharing what's going on. Maybe things need to be exchanged, right? Hey, can you take this
Yep.
on? Role flexibility, maybe identifying potential bottlenecks so that one person's not a single source of a single point of failure, right?
Yep.
So for teams, if you're not doing like what Charlie's saying, maybe a huddle or once a week check in with your teams regularly, don't set it and forget it. That doesn't work. You need to be coming in intentional, right?
Yep.
And having that meeting, having that agenda, and being very purposeful. In that, the other thing I would want to bring that you back to what you said earlier in the podcast is, implementing business redundancy. So like, are you documenting the key processes, or do you have that backup, or identify those critical roles? Or and the other one we didn't talk too much about, but I think it's really important too, Charlie, is that once you set these systems or processes up, how do you test them? Do you see where the potential gaps are, right? Like, so don't just think, oh, we did it and that's good, right? You got to test and see what's working
Yes.
or not, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because how do you know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So from a
so
technology
yeah.
standpoint, we have to test our backups. We have to test our archives for emails.
Mhm,
There's always a checks and balance. And same thing with our culture
mhm.
initiatives. We have fun quizzes that we do at the end of each week when we have focus on different things. And so there's always inspect what you expect, right? You
Yes.
can't just expect to say it and put it up and have it in print and then expect people to just get it.
Yeah. No, you have to go back. I do what they call a team performance assessment. We go look at all different aspects of organizational health, communication, execution, whole host of areas that we look at in this flywheel. So, as we're getting close to the end here, Charlie, as folks are listening in, I would love to have other people comment or share their thoughts on this redundancy, resiliency conversation, because we're just scratching the surface in this year, everybody. And we're gonna have I'm gonna have some new guests coming on here with the podcast, so we're looking for that. But please leave us your comments. Uh, we appreciate your 5-star reviews on your favorite podcast platform, or like us. Of course, we're on YouTube as well. And of course, Charlie and I and many of the other guests, we all have a very similar philosophy here in supporting you as a business owner or leader. And we're happy to talk with you and get you over the hump. Look for those areas, like test the challenges, do the assessments with you, so that you're better prepared. You are in a resilient place, and have the redundancy to be successful. With that all said, Charlie, what's some last thoughts, parting thoughts, ideas, things you want to make sure our listeners or their viewers here take in and walk away with tonight?
Yeah, just the 5 Ps. I talk about this with the team all the time. We never want to leave things to chance.
Mhm.
Um, as the Boy Scout model, right? Or now they call it Scouting of America. Um, always be prepared, right? Or be prepared. And so the 5 Ps are essentially basically piggybacking off of the be prepared mentality, which is, proper preparation prevents poor performance. And so, in anything that you do for the business, have proper preparation in place. That'll give you the best chance at building that resiliency and redundancy so that your business can continue, because ultimately your business is the golden goose
Hmm.
that I mean the goose that lays the golden eggs.
Yep.
And so many livelihoods of all the families that are of your staff are dependent on your business continuing and
Yep.
thriving and growing. And so um, protect that goose that lays the golden egg.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
so important. And I love how we're kind of two sides of a coin in this particular conversation. We're talking about processes and the systems, like you said earlier, um, and then the people side of it. And so we know all those things. And I'll just leave you to think about that. If you haven't assessed your team, your culture, if you haven't looked at that, you have a blind spot there, and that's where I can come in, and that's why I'm here with Steward Your Business, and I'm here to help you. I'm here to look at that, help you with your team, and help them rise up and have better success, and
yeah,
feel good and feel empowered. And
yeah,
so together, uh, Charlie and I, we collaborate. We're both individual companies, but we come on here and bring synergy partners to help you, the business owner and the leader, to say, hey, you know what? There's somebody else out there that can help me, and they're an advocate for me. They want to see me succeed. That's what we're committed to. That's what we're dedicated to. And that's why we enjoy having the Business Roundtable podcast. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Charlie, for coming back again. As always, glad to have you. Wonderful insights on this topic. Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening in. And we look forward to having you back on the next round of the Business Roundtable podcast. Until then, take care, everybody. Bye now.
All right. Have a great day.